Hello, everyone. This is a Decision Options podcast. My name is Gill Eapen. My guest today is Celina Lee, who is the CEO and co-founder of Zindi. Zindi hosts the largest community of African data scientists working to solve the world's most pressing challenges using machine learning and artificial intelligence. It connects data scientists with organizations and provide a place to learn, hone your skills, and find a job. Cindy's goal is to transform the African continent and showcase African data science talent to the world. Welcome, Celina.
Thank you so much, Gil, for having me.
Yeah, thanks for doing this. So this is a fascinating company. So I want to sort of talk a little bit about the history of the company. Um, how did you start it? When was it initiated? And what has been your sort of early experiences with it?
Mm. Yeah, we launched Zindi just over 5 years ago. We just had our fifth birthday in September. And we started Zindi. So it's three co-founders. It's myself, Megan Yates, and Echo Duker, who are the co-founders of Zindi. And I think what's interesting is the three of us kind of came from three pretty different, like distinct backgrounds, but in this space, and came to similar conclusions in terms of a need for a space like Zindi, a platform where young people in Africa would be able to build up their skills, showcase their talents, and be able to connect with the opportunities and the organizations that need them. And then on the other hand, for companies to be able to access the talent that they need. The demand for machine learning, AI, and data science talent is like exploding, and especially over the last 12 months with everything that's happening in AI. There's definitely a talent crunch. And I think with Africa being the fastest growing working age population in the world, it's, it is fertile ground for companies and organizations and problems to find the support and the talent that they need. So yeah, I mean, so I myself, I studied applied mathematics and computer science. I went into the corporate world for a bit, but very quickly went on to develop a career in international development. So I've lived and worked in Colombia and Panama and Thailand. I've done a lot of work kind of in countries in between. And but I've always had this coming from San Francisco and the Bay Area. I've always been really interested in and having that background in math. I've always been interested in how these innovations and these technologies that are coming out of a place like Silicon Valley actually translate into real impactful products or services for real people, for the rest of the 99% of the world that don't have the latest iPhone and the latest access to the latest technologies. How can these technologies actually improve everyday lives? And so that was kind of the start of, for me, like the idea for Zindi was that you know how can we create space where people who really deeply understand the challenges and the opportunities in a context like Africa, how can they build their skills to also contribute to the solutions that are coming out?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of mathematics, as you know, is it sort of levels the ground for developed and developing countries. And so we are sort of a unique time. I think Bill Gates said this, that artificial intelligence it is akin to sort of the user interface innovation that happened early on in the computer development. So it is sort of universal and prevalent, and really the hardware costs are declining. So costs are not a big a hindrance anymore. So anybody can approach this, anybody can utilize it, and there are a lot of educated people all around the world. And so what they may lack, and I think this is what Cindy is trying to do, is access. And
Mm-hmm.
so when you're sitting somewhere, so I know that you are in 40 or so countries in Africa right now.
We're in 52 African
50.
countries, and 190 countries around the world, across the world. So we have African roots, but we're global reach, as we say.
Yeah, so it's sort of the company is focused on developing world, it sounds to me. So it started in Africa, but it has expanded elsewhere. And
Yeah.
just to put this in context, so on your website, you talk about sort of three major focus areas:
Mhm.
learning, competitions, and jobs. So the
Mm.
first area here is study and learning. Uh,
Mhm.
and so I see courses here, Celina. So Chat GPT Mastery is a course that's here. 23 common data science interview questions for beginners that could come in
Yeah.
handy. And so talk a little bit about the process. So how do people, these are all online courses, I would think, right?
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, actually, if you look at the learning, compete, and jobs, that kind of describes the ideal journey that we envision for a young person. Well, it can be any of any age, but typically a lot of our users are young. And if you think about someone who's trying to build up their career and trying to build up their skills, like that's those three components are what we've hit on in terms of what, the whole package that we want a young person to be able to access. So it's learning through actual courses, through just accessing blogs, like these are the questions that you'll be asked when you go to an interview. This is how you choose a laptop that's appropriate, and that you can actually get as affordable in Africa. Starter notebooks. A lot of that learning content that's on our platform is actually from the community. The community contributes different, blogs and tutorials, and then we also leverage some of our partnerships with different organizations that also do training. So we ourselves don't do training, but what we're trying to do is make training accessible, learning content accessible. The competitions means that then whatever they're learning, now can they actually apply it to a real world problem that an organization or company actually puts up. That's the competitions is where companies put up data sets and problems. So then can they apply it in the real world? And then as they solve these different problems, it builds up their profile. And now can they use that to get a job? So those three things kind of have a relationship,
Mhm.
a natural relationship.
Yeah, and because it's a universal concept, a lot of people could approach these problems differently. And so this is my opinion. It's a bit different from going to a university and sitting around and learning physics 101 and chemistry 102, which is how education still progresses, which I argued that is becoming less and less relevant. And
Mm.
so what is lacking in the developing world is access. There might be a lot of ideas. They need some way to apply those ideas, right? So there is a study here. This is the Microsoft Rice Disease Classification Challenge. And so I
Mhm.
would imagine this is a competition
Yeah.
that people took part in it, right? So could you to talk a bit about it, just to set the context?
Yeah, so we've run about 300 competitions on Zindi over the last 5 years, and virtually every single one of them are actual data sets that came from an organization, comes from the industry or from government, and mostly in Africa. So, and these, I mean, we can pull out a few examples, but they really range. I think the fun part about data science is you get to play in everyone's backyard. So you can even see on the left-hand side of the competitions, you can actually choose the different sectors, everything from agriculture to retail to logistics, to climate change can be addressed with, in some way with data science, AI, and machine learning. So that's really exciting. And so even the competition that you're mentioning is that one we did quite a while ago with Microsoft, and that was to identify what type of disease the rice crop has, using computer vision. So images of the crop, of the rice crop, and being able to say, what type of disease it has. We've actually run a few of those, of different types of diseases, different, crops. There's so many applications in agriculture, which is so relevant in Africa, because obviously it's such a huge and important fundamental sector. Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm on the competition page, Celina. So this is really interesting. So, their difficulty, good for beginners, intermediate, advanced. So you can click on it, and depending on where you are, you can go into it. And then you have the skills, different skills here. So it's sort of run the gamut: prediction, classification, computer vision, natural language processing, forecasting, sentiment analysis, visualization, and so on and so forth. So pretty much all components of what is generally called artificial intelligence is here. And so based on your interest, you can go and look at, and based on your interest and your skill level, you can pick up something that could be a good match, right?
Yes, yeah. And then you also see that we have the open competitions and the closed competitions. So when a company comes to us with a data set and a problem, we post that onto the competitions page. It's open to anybody. It's free for anyone to join. And typically we leave these competitions open for anywhere between 1 month to 3 months, depending on the complexity and how many people we want to, attract to it. So the live competitions are the ones where you can still win money. So the top 3 winners, or sometimes the top 5 winners, will win money for their solution, and the companies then own the IP from the winning solutions. So the ones that are open means that you can still get onto the leaderboard, you can still potentially win. It hasn't closed yet. And then if you look at the closed ones, one of the things that we, part of the learning is that we leave those available to the community. So you just have to create an account on Zindi, still free. You can access the data sets and the problems from the closed competitions. You just can't win them anymore. So like you're saying, Gill, like if you have a certain interest in natural language processing, you can actually still work on any of the competitions that are in our library of data sets. Yeah.
Yeah, so I was looking at the most recent one here, RMB CPI Nowcasting Challenge.
Yeah.
So I show my ignorance here. So what is South African currency?
Rand. Yeah.
So CPI Nowcasting Challenge, and this is a substantial competition, 17,000 US dollars. So far, it started 21 days ago, it says here, and already it's something like 1,200 people are enrolled in it.
Yes.
And so could you talk a bit about it? So this is an advanced competition. It's about forecasting. It's about financial services. So it's really sort of forecasting inflation, right?
Yeah, it's forecasting inflation, but as close to real time as one can get. So this was, so I don't know if you're familiar with RMB, but that's Rand Merchant Bank, which is a major bank in Southern Africa. Their data science and research team were working on this problem because, CPI forecasting is, fundamentally important to, anyone in the financial sector. And I think there was like an element of it where each of the banks were kind of presenting their approaches, and the team at RMB, really just felt like they needed a leg up. They were working on this problem, but they saw a huge opportunity in being able to get an injection of new ideas and different perspectives, just different approaches to the problem from the community. They were particularly interested in, forecasting and, inflation is something that economists, often will approach and try to model. But, I think what a lot of people find interesting is, say you're an epidemiologist, or you're a, or in this case, you're an economist. You have your own ways that that are tried and true, that you approach these problems with. But a lot of people are wondering, well, what about machine learning? What about data science? What about big data and maybe alternative types of data? Can that improve the accuracy of these models that we've been building? So that's what's really interesting. And so in RMB's case, they're running this challenge. They're trying to get to a nowcasting model where they can predict CPI 1 month in advance. And they wanted to look at alternative data sets. I haven't been as close to that one, but they wanted to look at things like pollution trends, even social media, like what other data sets can feed into the model, to improve the accuracy.
Yeah, it's really fascinating. So as you say, economists and financial services traditionalists have their data sets, and forecasting in financial services hasn't been very good, whether it's a micro sense or macro sense. And so what might be lacking, as you say, is sort of alternative views of how to think about it. Social media is a really interesting one. I had somebody from Berkeley on the show some time ago, and we were talking about, how do people think about inflation? Most regular people look at or have an estimate of inflation by grocery shopping experience. So they go to grocery store, and next week they go again, and the prices have changed. That gives them an expectation of inflation. And there is sort of a gender difference here because women tend to grocery shop more than men. And so they have more of a real-time view of what inflation is doing compared to men, for example. I'm talking about US here. And so non-traditional data sets, I think, is a really powerful aspect of this, right? So can people who don't have a lot of experience in financial services industry, which could be a great advantage because you're entering this problem without any inherent bias to the problem, right?
Yes.
So what has been the sort of experience in these types of competition where people come from very different areas and attempted to solve these problems?
Yeah, it's been interesting. I mean, the approaches themselves, and even something as simple as, maybe the winning solution used, and we require everyone to use open source tools, open source libraries. As long as it's open and free, then they can use it. So just even knowing what people are using has been interesting for the clients. Just knowing about a new library that maybe they never knew about, and that the winning solution used has been useful. So yeah, I mean, it's quite interesting. I think a lot of companies, that's even what's most valuable to them, is that sometimes they just feel like, we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah.
So let's just see what 70,000 brains that are like out, and these are all like curious, ambitious, really energetic people, right? Otherwise they wouldn't be on Zindi. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. And what's also cool is, I mean, you mentioned about education. Like, I tell the people on the Zindi community all the time, it's like, you would have needed a PhD to do some of these things that you're doing right now. I literally have a friend who has like a PhD from Cornell in mathematics. And she did her dissertation on flood predictions, using satellite data, using soil, soil type, elevations, all these types of data sets that used to not be available, and even using the tools to analyze these data sets that used to not be available. But now, like, we ran a competition a couple years ago with UNICEF Malawi in partnership with ARM and Meta, to predict flood extents in southern Malawi using all open source, everything. Like, the satellite data was open source, the tools were open source, and these people are doing the work that my friend had done, for her PhD in mathematics years ago. So yeah, it's pretty incredible. And so a lot of the people who are contributing to corporates like RMB, and they're contributing to their thinking, they may not even have a university degree, and they're able to add value.
Yeah, so I was just thinking, Celina, so you have run 300 or so competitions, and it is a very diverse community. So you are in a lot of different countries, people with different educational backgrounds, really different education systems almost, right?
Yeah.
So do you have, are you thinking about sort of, could we accumulate some sort of insights, experience, best practices that sort of come from these competitions that could be quite useful for organizations, right? Is that
Yeah.
in the design?
It might be, but I guess like jumping forward. So, I mean, just talking about kind of the evolution of Zindi, what's been interesting is we started off with a focus on the competitions. I mean, the competitions are still kind of our bread and butter, what we can do very well, and what's like most exciting because of all of this, like, uncovering new ideas and everything. But as a business, we actually haven't talked yet about the companies that we work with, but as a business, in a way, something that we've come to understand in the last, say, 12 months or a bit more is that the value of these competitions is much more than the solutions that come out of it.
Hmm.
That, it's the competitions to me now are a means to an end, and
Yeah.
the end is not just the end of the competition, but it's a means to, for every competition that we run, as you've seen, we can actually upskill and give exposure to over 1,000 people at a time, to
Hmm.
new skills, to, new ways of thinking. They enter these competitions, this gets added to their profile. So now we also are adding data points to each individual that has entered the competition. And so the real ends is that each of these people who are on the Zindi platform can potentially get a job. And for companies, they potentially can hire and tap into this incredible database of not just incredible candidates, but a talent pool that is growing in skills every single day, and also that they now have unique data points on each of the candidates, because now they can actually see the candidates' actual, uh, journey as they've built up their own capabilities, and actually measured their capabilities. Yeah, so now a company can come to us and say, we want someone who's really good at computer vision using satellite data, and we can pull the top 20 people in
Hmm.
Africa, in
Yeah.
that specific area.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So it's sort of a resume builder, and
Yeah.
it goes both ways, right? So it allows the participant to sort of showcase their talent. And as you were mentioning before, the companies may have multiple objectives here. So as you say, it's a process. It's not just the results that come out of it, but companies are also sort of observing how did people approach these problems, and that give them better information as well, right? So if you hire like 100 data scientists and put them in a room and ask them to go solve a problem, and you come back 6 months later, you may get a solution, but there isn't sufficient sort of diversity that makes new ideas sort of percolate to the top, right? So I would
Yeah.
imagine innovative companies are looking for that type of a process too.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so cool to see people making connections across such diverse backgrounds. Like you'll see a team of someone from Tunisia with someone from Nigeria with someone from like Japan or something, working on a problem for a South African company, for example, and you get that cross-pollination of, people from all different backgrounds. We've even seen people start companies through the
Yeah.
relationship, the friends that they've made on the platform. And definitely people are making like lifelong friends and yeah, career partners. I mean, people are getting hired by each other on the platform. I mean, it's very cool to see what happens when you bring people from very diverse backgrounds together.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you said 52 countries in Africa alone, but if you look at the list here, you have countries like Hong Kong, India, Italy, um, South Africa, Switzerland, United
Yeah.
States. So yeah, so it has really sort of gone to a position of community building with a global scope, it looks like,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. I mean, I kind of describe Zindi now as like a GitHub meets a LinkedIn meets a GitHub, specifically for data science and AI skills. Because I do see what we're building up as in a way as a professional network, but much more than that, because not only are people representing themselves as professionals, they're actually also growing growing themselves as professionals. But yeah, but the community aspect is fundamental to Zindi's,
Yeah.
value proposition.
And I also see there are a lot of policy implications here, Celina. So the governments should be very interested in this too, sort of crowdsourcing ideas, crowdsourcing solutions. So there is a new competition here, Digital Green Crop Yield Estimate Challenge. Can you determine the crop yield for farms in India? And if you can do that systematically, there's a lot of policy implications too, right? So are governments really coming to the table with their problems?
That one is actually, yeah, I mean, for example, that one is funded by GIZ, the German government. And we've done actually quite a few competitions with GIZ. Well, India, we've done 2 in India and a handful of these types of competitions in Africa. And GIZ obviously is, partnering with local governments. So I think there is an interest. Governments can sometimes be hard to finally work with. I mean, just from I guess a procurement legal side, that's kind of the challenge, because there are actually, we actually have a project in the works that we've been trying to get over the line for a while, with one of the ministries in Africa, and they are really interested in using Zindi to solve one of these problems. It also has to do with, I think, oh gosh, now I can't remember, but it was using satellite data, having something to do with agriculture as well. But then using that to also recruit young talent into the ministry as well, because then government is also looking to hire top data science talent as well.
Yeah, I mean that's sort of, so there's a sort of policy question there, which is, are we heading toward a community of experts? So I wrote a book in 2009, and it's called Flexibility, in which I argued there are no reasons for companies to exist anymore, because University of Chicago economist Ron Coase said companies exist because of transaction costs. So if you're an automobile company, you don't want to have a transmission company, you don't want to have an engine company. There are transaction costs that they have to incur when you sort of separate them into different buckets. But with internet technology and artificial intelligence, we have driven the transaction cost to close to zero, which means that an individual then becomes a company with a specific set of skills and expertise that could be applied in a lot of different problems, right? So rather than going and sitting in an office room in a company, that individual will be a lot better off just applying expertise and skills. This is sort of in that direction, would you say?
Yeah. I mean, that's interesting. I mean, and COVID in some ways accelerated this trend that we've seen, because for Zindi, we're really, I mean, as we're talking about, like, we do the competitions, but we're also really talking to companies that are looking to hire talent. And I think the nature of the conversations before COVID are very different from the nature of the conversations during and after COVID. I mean, I think now we're seeing more companies wanting local, people who can physically come into the office, but still, like, it's very open. There's a lot of remote work. Companies are very open to remote work. And even companies that are wanting people to come into the office, I am also still seeing that they're very open to, they need a very specific skill set for a specific amount of time. Can they get that on Zindi? Yes. So I guess it's like that trend towards gig work. And we are, yeah, we're seeing a huge opportunity there. I wouldn't say that Zindi's like doubling down on that quite yet, but we're kind of leaving both doors open. We're helping companies hire full-time normal employees, but we've also been helping companies hire, contract-based kind of work. It'll be interesting to see which direction,
Yeah.
things go in.
Yeah, it's tough to predict. So you mentioned that governments are sometimes difficult, time-consuming to work with, but there are foundations who are interested in sort of macroeconomic challenges, policy issues. I read that Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation wants to invest $30 million into developing AI specifically in Africa. And I think they have a healthcare focus, but generally AI. And so, what is your perspective on, foundations and how should they be thinking about this? If they had an objective of, I would call this sort of democratizing technology, democratizing artificial intelligence, how should they go about it?
Yeah, I mean, foundations have a huge role that they can play. They have the advantage to governments that they are able to move a bit quicker and kind of, do their own due diligence and, outside of a political mandate, they actually can, do studies and understand kind of where the where the opportunities are and actually move on them relatively quickly. And at the same time, like governments, their mandate ultimately is probably, is long-term development, economic and social development. So yeah, I do see a huge opportunity for foundations to support the development of AI. I think, especially a player like the Gates Foundation, they must be thinking about this idea that, I mean, kind of what inspired me is thinking about how can we make sure that more diverse, people around the world have a seat at the table where the solutions are being built, where AI solutions that solve African problems are actually being built and solved by African developers who understand the opportunity and the context the best. So that's where skills development comes in, uh, as well as making sure that, I think one of the challenges is a lot of foundations and even governments like support skills building, but how do you make it practical and in a way where you're creating a pathway directly into value adding positions, like either in the government or in the private sector. You need to not just build up skills, but you actually have to as well then take it to the next level, which is where they can create impact on the ground in the roles that they take. So, and making sure they have roles. So that's, I mean, yeah, and that's something that for Zindi, like we see as really important that we're trying to contribute to. Yeah.
I mean, we have sort of global challenges, right? So the environment is one of them. And this is not something one country can solve. It is something the world has to solve. And so this is sort of a natural area where a lot of participants from a variety of countries come together to solve that sort of global problem. So then, I'm just thinking aloud here. Then it goes to sort of UN, some
Yeah.
sort of world organizations who could potentially take part in here too, right?
Yeah, and we work with the UN. We work with a number of the UN agencies. Like I had mentioned, UNICEF in Malawi. We have a partnership with ITU, which is a part of the UN system as well, where we're running a whole series of AI for Good challenges with the ITU, which include things like landslide, things that have to do with climate, with energy consumption. And yeah, I mean, I think you're right. Like it takes a tremendous amount of coordination globally to solve some of these, these global problems. Essentially, the Sustainable Development Goals, address that, and both private and public sector, and geographically. So, yeah, I mean, hopefully, Zindi can, can play a small part in that. And I mean, we are a lot of the competitions that we've run, or there's a good set of competitions that we run that are relating to climate change, to food security, to yeah, any number of the sustainable development goals. We once took stock and we made kind of like a visualization of all the sustainable development goals we're solving through the challenges, and it was, it is significant.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also thinking that it's not only solving an identified problem, but also diagnostically picking up information from all around the world, right? So I'm thinking
Yeah.
diseases here, for example, right? So there's a lot of talk about, new diseases coming through because, the ice caps are melting, there are a lot of old organisms released into the environment. And this is happening all around the world. So there's some sort of a surveillance diagnostic opportunity, and it requires sort of a worldwide scope to do that too, right? So there
Yeah.
might be opportunities here in that direction as well, I wonder.
Yeah. I mean, data collection is fundamental. We've done a bit of data collection. I mean, I think the unique position of Zindi is that our community is so diverse, and particularly for Africa, there's very few communities or groups that actually cover like virtually every country in Africa. So we have been approached, and we have like engaged a bit on data collection, initiatives. And yeah, so and I think we are uniquely positioned in some ways. But what you're talking about maybe emergence of new diseases or different things that are happening, different trends that are maybe happening on a global scale. I'm also really interested in the applications of AI and different types of data, especially like Earth observation data, the types of data that's available now and free and publicly is incredible. So yeah, so in those types of use cases, I'm actually even especially interested in ways that we can even model or try to find ways to fill data gaps or pick up on these types of trends using AI, for example.
Yeah, and for example, astrophysics is increasingly moving in the AI direction as well. And so, we have this problem of meteors and asteroids coming to us, and a lot of them are picked up by amateur astronomers, using fairly basic technology. So with artificial intelligence extending there too, it's not only sort of the disease modalities, but also sort of external threats. It's generally in the age of surveillance, and surveillance cannot be very rigid, right? So if you have a protocol, say this is the data that we're going to use, and this is how we're going to analyze it, we're going to miss a lot of things. So surveillance requires sort of flexibility and global scope, and this might be an additional advantage.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about, in Africa, we're hearing a lot about IoT and, sensor-based data, digital twins. There's all types of data sources, even like the drone technologies, like we're going to do a competition and we may be leveraging some drone data and imagery. So there's so many new types of data sets that I guess can speak to that aspect of surveillance or open surveillance, and just new things that might be able to picked up at scale now because of, everything that's out there.
It's really fascinating. So I was just looking at the jobs page, Celina. So there are a lot of jobs here, at all levels. Yeah, from senior data scientist to CTO, and so all sorts of jobs here. So what has been your success level here in terms of getting people hired?
Yeah, we're still relatively early days with the jobs. I think even more than the jobs board is important. But even more than that, I think the two other elements that are that we more recently have launched that help companies find the right talent is Zindi Talent Search, which is what we're calling our talent search product, that companies can now create an account and log into the Zindi database to search for candidates based on, their performance on different competitions, geography, so that's where it becomes like a LinkedIn. You can search for, self-reported CV type of data, as well as actual performance data or, technical capabilities data. So that's Zindi Talent Search. And then the other aspect is competitions for recruitment. So we have, competitions where companies can choose from our catalog of competitions, or they can put up their own data sets, and then they can hire directly off of the leaderboard. And that means that they get like a short list of people who are actually qualified and, are actively applying for their job. So for companies, it's the job advertisement that you can see on the platform, but it's also the searching the database and attracting and vetting talent with competitions. And so we help companies in that holistic way. And we are, we can do once-off bits and pieces, but we also see that a lot of companies are looking to build their talent pipeline like long term, or they're just they're making multiple hires throughout the year. So we also have memberships to Zindi where they can tap into all three of those aspects. And then in terms of like job placements, like we're still relatively new. And I guess what's happened is it came out organically because we saw a lot of people were getting jobs off of Zindi. So now we're trying to capture that value and, create a more structured way for companies to actually hire off of the platform. But we've seen a lot of people getting jobs off of Zindi. We just haven't necessarily monetized it.
Yeah, so I mean, it's always dangerous to reduce a human to a set of numbers, but I can see some sort of a Z-score here, Celina, Zindi score, or of somebody who has sort of repeated, or taken part in repeated competitions. So there's a lot of data on that person. Hiring is always it's increasingly a problem for companies. Finding talent is the most difficult thing. And so I think there is a lot of value there as well. And so where do you want to go with this? So if you look forward, let's say 2 to 3 years from now, what would be your sort of satisfying outcome from Zindi?
Well, I see that the challenges and the opportunities that are in Africa, are similar, are kind of, there's definitely parallels in other regions, particularly in other emerging and developing markets. So whether it's the Middle East, South Asia, Southeast Asia, Latin America, I'm excited about, potentially a real global play for Zindi, but particularly still with a focus on emerging markets, with the idea that, everyone knows the usual suspects in terms of where they can get talent, but can we help, the other corners of the world where, one of the things that we say was at Zindi is that talent is distributed equally, but opportunity is not. And that's one of the things that we're trying to solve. And it's actually a win-win. It's a win-win-win. It's a win for everybody because, not only do they need the opportunities, but organizations, companies, governments also need the opportunity to be able to tap into this incredible talent pool. So for me, it's that's the exciting that's the exciting thing.
Yeah, so it's access. Access is what's lacking. Talent is everywhere. Demand and supply are both there, but they don't come together in a sort of efficient way. And I also argued that initial conditions are quite important. And so, somebody in Nigeria, getting an early start with this type of environment or access, the slope that person could be on is significantly different from otherwise, right? So there's a significant value in getting people started early. And
Yeah.
go ahead. Yeah.
And we see, I mean, the population is very young in Africa. I mean, and that's true to a lot of, these regions that I'm talking about. So it's a huge opportunity to get them in, from an early age. Half of the people on Zindi are still actually in university. So our population does tend to be young. And yeah, I mean, the stuff that people pick up, I mean, they just pick it up so fast. Many of the people on Zindi are self-trained. Um, they take a few Udemy and Coursera courses, then they get onto Zindi, and then you see them all over, all over Zindi. And I mean, literally, I know a lot of people who started on Zindi, and we do a few live events, or we have ambassadors across the continent, and they run in-person hackathons or workshops. And we've seen people where they go to a hackathon on a weekend and they just sit there like they can't even figure out how to start. And then a few years later, you see them on the leaderboard and they're like winning competitions, and then they're getting jobs. I mean, it's really incredible. But yeah, I mean, that's why it's important to make sure everyone does have access to these opportunities.
And I remember reading somewhere, Celina, so I can't quite remember, but there have been instances of people getting scholarships into major universities in the US, places like
Yeah.
Columbia or something. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we had the one of the early ambassadors at Zindi, he's in Uganda. He got a full scholarship to Duke University to get a master's in data science. We had a woman in Nigeria who she was starting to win competitions on Zindi, so I got to know her, but she got a scholarship to get a master's degree at Notre Dame University. So I think, yeah, there's huge, and then even within the African continent, there's a few really amazing universities. In South Africa, there are a number of really great universities, but then in Rwanda and other countries, there's also AIMS, which is the African Institute for Mathematical Sciences. There's ALU, the African Leadership University, and then there's also Carnegie Mellon Africa. So we do see actually a lot of our data scientists ending up going to those universities as well and getting master's degrees, or graduate degrees.
Excellent. So finally, so what's your business model? How do you keep it economically viable and
Yeah,
growing?
so I mean, it's been a tough economic climate the last 12 months, as you can imagine. So we have in more, the last year, we've been really focused on our business model and working with clients. So I'm very proud that we've worked with some of the biggest names like Microsoft, Google, DeepMind, and then as well as the banks, the telcos, the consulting companies in Africa, including like Standard Bank, RMB, which we were talking about, Deloitte, Ernst & Young, KPMG. So we're really focused a lot on the African multinational kind of enterprise level clients. We help them with attracting and hiring talent, with crowdsourcing solutions to the competitions. And then also we offer the competition platform, the Zindi platform, as a ring-fenced environment for companies to all, the same experience that the 70,000 are doing on Zindi publicly. Sometimes companies want to use it for their learning and development area, kind of like a playground for their own data scientists to build up their skills. So in essence, those three areas, the competitions for solutions, the upskilling, and then the talent hiring, are the things that we help companies with. We charge either as a membership that starts at $30,000 per year and lets them tap into those different benefits, or we also do like a once-off competition or a once-off hiring, but that's becoming less and less. Yeah, and aside from those big corporate clients, we also do help startups. A lot of African startups hire data scientists as well.
So do you anticipate some sort of venture capital, private equity, sort of teaming up, given
Yeah, I mean,
that, yeah.
we did raise a seed round 2 years ago, and so we do have some of the major African VCs on our cap table. And our biggest investor is Shakti Ventures, which is in San Francisco. So we have a good mix of, VCs that are aligned and supporting Zindi. We may raise next year, but right now we've been so focused on the business model and revenue. So we're actually, kind of close to a profitable position, and then we'll kind of take it from there and decide what to do next. But next year we may end up raising.
Excellent. Yeah, this has been a fascinating journey, and really, it has a lot of expansion options that I think about it. Because of its global scope, it can go in a lot of different directions. So
Yeah.
excellent. Yeah.
Yeah, no, thank you so much, Gill. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for spending time with me.
Thank you.
Bye.